Alrighty, so in this lecture, we're going to talk about early decision. And this is a concept that I've introduced actually in the PY3 lecture in your third professional year as something you need to consider when you're applying to medical school. So essentially, this is a program that allows you to apply pretty much to one medical school. So you fill out the MCAT application and then you select the basically the early decision pathway instead of like a traditional pathway or an MD PhD pathway. And by electing to do this, there are some very obvious, pros and there's some very obvious cons to making this decision. So by doing early decision, you're committing to one school and one school only. So at that point, you're sacrificing the opportunity to apply to multiple programs. So this is like the perfect match for you personally. Let's say you have family in town or something along those lines. So let's go through each one of the pros and cons to address some of this stuff. So when you are doing early decision, basically you're applying to your dream school, but it demonstrates basically like your dedication to that program. Like you are 100% committed to going to this program. There's no better school that fits your needs as an applicant, whether, family, you have a good support network, it matches your, medical school statistics and so on. So the benefit of doing this is that you basically are given an abbreviated cycle, a medical school cycle, where you will have a final decision by October 1st. And keep in mind, for most medical students, they might not have even gotten a single interview at this point, and you already know for a fact that you're actually committed to a medical school at that point in time. So that's a pretty nice component. You can really relax the rest of your time as an appy student or basically until you matriculate. So it kind of expedites the whole process. And the benefit is that, application costs are essentially eliminated. You have one finite cost of purchasing AMCAS, which is like $170, and that's it. You don't have to multiply that number by all the medical schools you apply for and then multiply all the CASPER scores you have to send to the medical schools and all the secondaries that follow that as well, which each have costs associated with them. So it's a very, very cost-effective method that can minimize, the expense of medical school applications. Now, the downsides are that it does not lower the medical school standards of acceptance. Just because you want to go to a particular school doesn't mean that you have the academic criteria to get into that particular program. So, this is for individuals who are very, very competitive, who basically are kind of get their first shot at places they really, really want to go to. So, the other downside is that there's only a very, very small amount of designated seats at each medical school that offers an early decision program. So, for instance, let's say that the medical school has 140 seats at the program. Well, they might only offer 1 to 3 early decision seats because they want to get a wide, diverse group of people from different areas. And those are just rough numbers. There might be more, there might be less, depending on which particular medical school you are applying to. And most medical schools don't even advertise, how much that is. It's more of an internal process that kind of waxes and wanes with how many early decision candidates there are each year. But usually it's like a preset amount. And so the other con is that, you're contractually bound if you are accepted, and that sounds, how is that a con? You got into medical school. Well, the downside could be that, let's say you apply early decision, you're really confident you want to go to a program, and then turns out later on that it's not as great as you were originally anticipating, or maybe the school was a good fit, but the peers that you're working with are just monstrous, or they're very, very, unproductive, and they don't collaborate well. So a lot of things can change, and you're kind of stuck in that position. You've foregone the other opportunities. I think that's more of a minor con, and it's pretty rare of a circumstance. You wouldn't be applying to a program unless you really, really wanted to go there and you researched it well. But that is a possibility. And so the other con is that we've only talked about the benefits of getting in during that October 1st final decision. What happens if you are rejected? So that's where things kind of get really challenging because, like I mentioned, rolling admissions is very important for medical school application process in the sense that, the earlier you apply, the more opportunities you have of basically getting access to interviews, which are a finite number. So if you don't find out until October 1st, then you basically, let's say you get rejected, now you have to scramble to get as many applications submitted to other medical schools, and they're going to think you're very, very late because you submit your application, then it takes some time to fill out the secondaries, And at that point in time, they might have already like sifted through an entire stack of applications and offered all the interview slots they want to for the particular month. So you can be at a severe disadvantage if you are considering early decision and you don't actually get in. So it can really derail your application process. It's not to say that you won't get into another school afterwards, but you're definitely competing for less and less interviews because most of them might have been offered at that point in time. Granted, so my recommendations, I suppose, are that early decision is really something that needs to be very, very carefully considered, and I almost want to say reserved for individuals who have very strong medical school statistics. They have very convincing MCAT scores, grade points, and as a pharmacy student, you are an individual who might have a little bit more of that background. If you do really well on the MCAT and then you also have a 4.0 pharmacy GPA, well then I would say, and you have like substantial ties to a region, then you might be a really good option for early decision as compared to maybe some of the other traditional applicants who don't have that unique pharmacy background and still have very good stats. So, by doing early decision, I guess the final note is, yeah, you might have access to basically getting into medical school early. You can cut down on costs, but you are kind of gambling in the sense that you're competing for a very, very small number of seats, which might have been an absolute layup for you if you had done a traditional medical school application process instead of early decision. But because you're only designated a certain amount of seats, let's say they have 5 seats for early decision applicants and you're applicant number 6. Well, what happens? You're rejected from that school, and now you basically are not going to be able to go to that school despite the fact that you were probably extremely well qualified and could have easily outbeat some of the other traditional applicants who just did the regular application cycle. So there are a lot of pros and cons to it, and I think you have to be careful with how you approach this. So, I personally did not do early decision, so I can't really, say much about it other than the information I've provided thus far. So I think the best opportunity might be to talk to someone who has actually done this process and can articulate, maybe talk to someone who got in and then talk to someone who didn't and kind of figure out what's best for you at that time. But, as pharmacy students and professionals, we might be a little bit further down the line. So we might have ties to the region with like our spouse being, concentrated in the area or has a job already located there. You have kids in school. So those can be also very convincing reasons why, you want to stay local at your local university. So you can kind of play those things into your favor, especially if you are competitive. Additionally, you'll see on the right-hand side the Medical School Early Decision Guide. This is just a blog post from my website. Here's the QR code here for more information about the specifics about this. It kind of covers what I've talked about, but has more like formal written text. And that concludes the early decision.